Hey watch friends, today we're going to check out the Canadian-based microbrand Wayforth, and this is their Voyager model. This actually launched on Kickstarter and was successfully funded, but now as of time of recording, it's actually available directly through their website, and I'll of course have a link down the video description. So you can order this today. It's listed at $375 without the bracelet, but as of time of recording, there's actually a $50 sale, so it's $325 and then $63 for the bracelet. Let's go ahead and dive straight into this. Before we do, if you saw that banner, they did send this one into the channel, and I of course always want to be upfront about that. As far as the specs, this comes standard with a 1-year warranty, which I don't think is any concern because as we'll see, it has reliable components. The case is coming in measured from roughly the 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock position at dead on 41 millimeters. The bezel is pretty much what I would call flush. It's coming in at 40.9 millimeters. The lugs are a strap change friendly 20 millimeters, and it does come standard on a strap that we'll check out here momentarily as well. As far as the lug to lug, that's coming in at a reasonably compact 48 millimeters. I will say, in overall wear characteristics, I think this wears smaller than the 41 would denote, and that's inclusive of the lug to lug. It's actually more small wrist friendly than you might otherwise expect from those specs, so do stay tuned if you have a smaller wrist. You'll see it on my 6.5 inch wrist. As far as the thickness, this is inclusive of the crystal. I'm getting 13.3 millimeters, which isn't the slimmest in the world, but I think again, it wears much slimmer. And part of that is owing to the fact that their stated spec is only 11.25, so 11.25 without the crystal. And I really think that that's pretty consistent with how it actually wears on wrist, because you have a fairly slim mid case for that. As far as the crystal itself, you probably already picked up on, this is a single dome sapphire crystal, and it does feature inner AR coating. I love that distortive effect that you get, and we'll check that out more as we go through. As far as the movement, this is a Seiko Mecha Quartz, specifically the VK64. For those who aren't familiar with the Mecha Quartz, as the name would denote, it is largely based on a quartz movement. However, for the chronograph function, as we'll look at, it does have a smooth sweep, so that's going to be more analogous to an automatic or to a mechanical style watch. I personally think they're a good hybrid and a good incorporation. I know they're not always the most popular movements, but they're reliable, they keep good time, they're great for everyday grab-and-go kind of watches, and we'll check that out. As far as the water resistance, I think it's respectable for being a chronograph. That's coming in at 100 meters or 10 atmospheres. Not the highest in the world, but it's not a dive watch, so I think it's very sufficient. I'm glad to see that it's up from 50 that many of them would offer. As far as the weight, on the strap that we saw popped up earlier, and we'll check out further, this is coming in at 82.5 grams, so really not weighing you down there at all. However, on this bracelet, which is my personal preference, this is sized to my 6.5 inch wrist, coming in at 135.8 grams. So squarely in the middleweight territory, I'd say on the lighter side of middleweight, really one that's going to be very comfortable on wrist, and we'll talk about why as we go through, because there's a lot of things that feed into that, and weight is just one of those components. So with that, let's go ahead and dive deeper and get a better feel for what this is like to live with. As far as colors, this one comes in a slew of color options. Obviously, there's the yellow that we're looking at here today. There's additionally going to be 7 other variants for 8 total. There's a blue, a green, a black version, and there's actually a few of those. There's a gray version, an off-white version, which is kind of like a silvery color. There's additionally a DLC black version, as well as there is a black dial that has gilt accents as well, and that one's kind of a dual tone there for that. So you've got an abundance of choices available. No matter which color you pick, you're going to notice a lot of common characteristics for each of these. First, they're going to be a bicompax layout for that chronograph, and we'll talk about the subdials as we go through. One of the big things, though, that you're going to notice is this has loads of depth to it, and part of that is the overarching construction. So they actually have that center, which is the color, in this case the yellow, disc that is really kind of set up on top. So what that does is that gives you some depth for those subdials, but then additionally for the chapter ring, you're going to notice that that's kind of sunken down in because you have that floating dial effect. And then same thing is true, you get even more depth when you look over to the date wheel, where that has kind of like a nice framing for that and drops down in there even further than the chapter ring. One of the things for me personally, and this one was a no-brainer with which color option I wanted to go with, I love this rich yellowish gold coloration on this. It has a very satiny sheen to it, and I've really been impressed and pleased with this, especially across lighting. You're going to notice it has like a nice radiance to that overall, but it just has a very smooth finish. It reminds me almost of like a Christmas tree ornament, which is kind of that satiny effect, but that really gives a nice reflectivity to it. Very cool touch, in very visually interesting there. As far as the sub-dials, you're going to notice at the 3 o'clock position, you do have, in typical fashion with this VK64, you're going to have a 24-hour indicator for that. And then at the 9 o'clock position, you're going to see that that is your running minutes for your chronograph functionality. Your primary second hand that we'll look at here is going to be your complement for that for the chronograph function. As far as the subdials themselves, these particular ones, as you can see, they're accented in black, which ties in nicely with that chaptering, and I think goes so well with this gold coloration. For me, go Pittsburgh Steelers, nice color combination there, and I really think this actually ties in well, so I'm looking forward to a Steelers season being right around the corner. Don't give me a dislike for that if you have a different team. As far as the subdials, though, you're going to notice that this does have a railroad track texture for both of those, so that adds some real interesting light play, but additionally, that's part of what gives you even more of that depth effect for that. One of the things that's really cool, and you don't see very commonly, or at least I can't readily recall, is the way that the text on the subdials, you're going to notice it's kind of like a 6-spoke wheel construction for that. So the way that they actually laid out the text, instead of trying to cram that in, they were able to go with larger text because they did more of a vertical orientation, kind of running sideways, and I think that gives a really neat look for it as well. So it's functional, but I also think that that's a really neat aesthetic choice. Shifting over to the date wheel, as you can see, that is incorporated at the 6 o'clock position, and as we already looked at, that is kind of cut down in, so that gives you that additional depth for that as well. And then the date wheel is what I would call color matched, and that's really kind of tying into the accent color, so in this case, the black that you have for that. And I think it really blends in well, but also, because of that white text against the black, you really have excellent contrast, so very legible date wheel, despite the fact that that's kind of sunken down in there. And then as far as the chaptering itself, again, that sunken construction, it does have white printing all the way around, so it ties in nicely with the date wheel, and that is going to have, of course, for precision legibility, you're going to have your 5th second scale, which is what I would expect for a chronograph layout. So whether you're looking at your minutes or you're running chrono, you do have that capability there. As far as the hardware, this one for the handset is a fairly standard style. So this is what I would call a pencil style handset for both your hour and your minute. It is faceted, it's going to be full polish, so you do get decent light play, but most importantly, I think it has pretty good contrast. In this indoor lighting, as you can see, whether you pick up in better contrast from the lighter lume, and especially against those black subdials, or kind of picking up the reflectivity, I think this is always pretty legible, which is exactly what you want in a chronograph. As far as the primary, I guess, secondhand, so in this case, we're talking about the chronograph secondhand, so that one that's stationary there, that is going to be black in this particular application, which of course suits the yellow dial perfectly. But then that is going to be what I would describe as a pretty traditional chronograph hand, in that is what I would call a lance type shape for that. When you shift over to your actual subdials there, you can see that those are going to be more of like a needle kind of accent, and those do perfectly switch over to that complementary yellow color, which ties in with the dial. Just such great execution as far as that kind of yellow and black combination as you go through. Really well done and very clean across the board. As far as the markers or indexes themselves, you're going to see that these are pretty traditional or pretty basic here. These are rectangular, but they are nicely faceted all the way around, so you do get good light play for those. With the nature of the bicompact construction, you'll see that this does not have at the 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and then additionally with that date wheel at the 6 o'clock position, it doesn't have a marker there either. But one of the things you're going to notice is this does have lume applied, and I'm sure you've already picked up on that. The lume performance on this, I think, is sufficient. For being a chronograph style watch, it's not going to win any lume monster competitions or anything along those lines, but at the same time, I think it is plenty adequate for what it is. Could they have amped it up? Yeah, probably a little bit. However, I think it performs pretty well. One of the things that I do like, though, is this with having that yellow dial. As far as the light play, as you're going into kind of lower light, I do really like the way that that picks up, and you can get some kind of light play with that as well, so that's a fun touch also. Shifting over to the bezel, this is where things get pretty unique here. So you do have on the outside, you have the traditional bezel that we talked about previously. That is very slightly set back, but for all intents and purposes flush. It has a nice construction, so it's fixed for the exterior bezel. That has an undercut, and you're going to notice it has a nice brush, polish, and then brush for those chamfer cuts. That does have kind of a taper chamfer out to that. And that leads to your black bezel insert that you can see here. This bezel insert is aluminum, and it does have nice legible, very well clean cut for that, and it does have a tachymeter as you'd expect for a traditional chrono. But where things get really cool is that's actually not the primary bezel. So the primary bezel though is going to be this inner, and that's kind of a compressor style or internal rotating bezel. So one of the things you're going to notice there, you get excellent light play for that. So they brought in that kind of like brush silver. It almost looks like a brush stainless steel kind of feel or essence for that. So that's going to be circular brushing all the way around there. You do have clean black text, of course, the triangle, so a pip style at the 12 o'clock position, but you do have the ability to actually rotate that around. So it has a 12-hour configuration, and you can adjust that. So if you want to track 2 different time zones, you have a little bit of like quasi GMT kind of functionality that you can go here. So that's pretty versatile overall, and I also think it just really gives a great look to it. It's not something that to me seems busy at all, but I actually think they incorporated a heck of a lot, which is remarkable to be able to incorporate that much without making it feel busy. So very well done there. As far as the case itself, the case is going to be what I would describe as like a boomerang kind. It's a very flowing curvature to it. So it's more than just a steep downturn. You can see the entire case really has that nice flow and curve. So yes, it does have pretty steep downturn, but the whole case itself has that nice curvature to it. You're going to notice that there's a nice mix of both brushing and polishing as you go all the way around there. So it does have horizontal brushing running from front to rear on the case, which is always my preference. Then you have nice polish facets on both the underside as well as the top side. One of the things you're going to notice is at the top of the lugs, it has a really interesting kind of compound cut there where that tapers in, so you can see the lug itself widens out as far as the visual. I think that not only is interesting and visually appealing for that, but it does really kind of slim that out for the overall effect, and I think that's very nicely done. Really like that touch. As far as tracking those downturned lugs out, as you can see, they do come just a little bit proud of the case back, or a little bit past the case back, so I think they nest really nicely on wrist. As you go to the aerial view, or the primary top view of the lugs, you can see again just that visual slimness that achieves with that kind of side cut for that. And then you do additionally have textural play as well, so you can see the brushing tied in with that polishing, very nice. And then as you look in between the lugs, you can see just traditional lug, which this does have a fitted end link for the bracelet itself, but you can see that's polished in there, and I don't think it's overdone. It's not real in your face, and actually, in fact, you have to kind of look for it to even notice that it's there, so that's a nice little touch. And then on the 3 o'clock side, as you can see, it does not have a crown guard, which I think would just be way too much with these pushers here, so it keeps it nice and accessible. As far as the crown itself, this is, as you'd probably expect, is a push-pull configuration for this, which again, with being the chronograph style, I think that suits it well. The crown is coming in at 6.3 millimeters for your primary crown. Over on the 10 o'clock crown, the one that adjusts your inner bezel, that one is coming in at 5.3 millimeters. That one is not a screw down, so you can just grab a hold of that and move that left to right without any issues there. As far as the primary crown, as you can see, it is signed. It's going to be a full polish, and it does have a coin edge on that, and that's true of both your 10 o'clock as well as your 3 o'clock crown. And then as far as the pushers, they're just a nice traditional style here. So they have a nice kind of tactile click to those, as well as just the polishing accents, and I think it's all overall well incorporated, so no complaints there. Shifting over to the caseback is a screw-in configuration for this. It's a fairly basic caseback overall. It does have your basic text in the middle. You're going to notice that is, of course, a solid caseback, and it has in your text, you're going to notice that there's a nice contrast between blasting as well as brushing, so that does give a little bit of visual interest. And then, of course, this is labeled with the limited edition on the back for this batch at least. As far as the bracelet, as I mentioned, the bracelet is optional for this one, and I really think, to me, this is absolutely a must-get for it. For only $63, at least at the sale price as of time of recording here, I think it is worth every penny for that. The bracelet itself is tapered from 20 millimeters at the lugs down to 18 millimeters at the clasp. While it does technically have male end links, it really folds over nicely because of that kind of 5-link or quasi-5-link construction for this. It really does drop nicely, so no issues with the drape, and in fact, I'm actually glad that they did that. I think it's a much cleaner look than if they had tried to go with a female articulation for that, and we'll check out the actual articulation here shortly. The finishing is brushing the full length. It does have quick release spring bars on the back, so easy to change out between the factory leather this bracelet, or alternatively any other strap of your choice. It's also held in with screws, and if you don't already have one, do encourage you to pick up a quality screwdriver. I'll of course have a link down in the video description. Amazon affiliate link helps out the channel, doesn't cost you anything, and it's good for anything you purchase, not just that one. As far as the articulation, as I mentioned, excellent articulation on this. Despite the fact that these are not independently articulating 5-link construction, it does drape so nicely, and it really doesn't give up anything. Both lateral and horizontal wiggle and play for that is just perfect. It's well dialed in overall. Doesn't feel kind of sloppy or cheap, but at the same time, it just has such great drape and articulation across your wrist, makes it exceptionally comfortable. Also, no hot spots or anything like that, including from the quick release spring bars, at least on my wrist. As far as the clasp is a basic fold-over construction. This is one of the areas where I don't think it has the most premium look or feel to it. It's a pretty basic clasp. It gets the job done, but at this point, we've seen a lot of higher-end clasp in the Microbrand space, so I'm going to give that as a spoiler, that is going to be one of my critiques here. It's a basic fold-over, though, and it does have a double pusher configuration. It is milled on the interior, so plenty sufficient as far as overall quality. No real complaints there. Like I said, it gets the job done. It is signed on the exterior on their fold-over, and it does feature 3 micro adjust holes, which I'm glad that they kept the overall size for that. It keeps it from being too bulky or anything like that. However, it is always nice to have more options as far as adjustability. All right, so now you should hopefully have a much better feel for this watch as a whole, but let's go ahead and bring in some comps to get a better idea for a variety of areas. First, here it is next to an RZE Endeavor, and you can see this in the yellow, and you can see they're relatively similar. This was previously my main Steelers watch. You can see with this, with having that black incorporation as well, I think it's even better suited to that, but that gives you an idea. So first, you can see visually comparison next to the 40mm watch here to give you an idea as far as overall sizing, but also the colors. Then bringing it in next, here is an unconventional but also stated spec of 41mm. This is the Le Sablier Chrono Sport. This is another Mecha Quartz, as you can see that VK64 for that as well. So very similar layout, but you can see an extremely different look for it. And I think visually, this you can draw your own conclusions. This is obviously much more angular and has a lot of different pieces to it, but this really with its flowing lines, like I said, I think wears smaller, especially from that wrist footage. And then here it is finally next to another unconventional one. This is the Zelos Starfighter, and as you can see, this one is an automatic here, but it's going to be a similar bi-compacts kind of layout. So overall similar look to that, but a very different looking watch as a whole. And then of course with being automatic, that is going to be an overall thicker presence for that one. But that one's stated at 41mm too, so it gives you an idea hopefully of the sizing. As far as now jumping into the overall wrap-up, first for the positives, I've got to say, for this, I've already touched upon a lot of these pieces. The comfort is excellent. The weight is great. The case itself curves and sits so nicely on the wrist, but really the bracelet, in my opinion, this is one of the areas where it very much shines. That great articulation, the overall, I think the sizing, the balance, even on my 6.5-inch wrist, it just fits great. It wears well. It's been very nice in that respect. The color on this particular one, as I've already kind of waxed on about that, this one, I really think it's a beautiful color. I like the finishing, I like the color choice, the shading, everything about it I think looks really good, but I really don't think you can go wrong with any of the versions to pick your own taste if you want more subdued or a little more punch. As far as the dome, I mentioned that we would come back to that. We've already seen it throughout in the various footage, but I love that single dome. It is just the perfect amount of distortion. Anytime you have the wrist in any kind of normal orientation or configuration, you get no distortion whatsoever. But then as you want to get that playfulness and that distortion, you can just get that perfect single dome kind of distortion. And it just adds so much kind of like a vintage playfulness to it. Love that execution. Think that is excellent. Perfectly chosen crystal in my opinion. And then finally, the finishing. At the price point of being even on the bracelet, as of time of recording at least, sub $400, despite the fact that this is a Mecha Quartz, I think you get a nicely finished watch that's on the bracelet. That would also come with the leather strap for that if you go with that configuration. But the overall finishing, I've got to say, I think everything's clean. I think it's well laid out, well designed. Really can't complain about that. I think you're getting a good watch for the money. But what about some critiques? I mentioned that I would already revisit and already gave a spoiler for this. I would like to see this kicked up, especially, even if I added it, $20, $25 to the price of the bracelet, I would have liked to have seen a toeless micro adjust clasp. I just really think that would have been a welcome addition to an already very comfortable watch, just to get it dialed in a little more and make it feel just a little more premium. So that would have been a nice touch. As far as the bezel, I have not had any issues. I've had issues in the past with the rotating bezels when they do not lock down. However, with this one, I think it's pretty well dialed in. As we saw there, no issues. I still probably would have preferred if they had gone with a locking crown for that, just so you could guarantee that you wouldn't possibly bump it. But the fact that this is only a 12-hour bezel, it's really not that critical. It's not like you're going to run out of oxygen based on that. So I think it's fine choice, but personally, preference-wise, I would have probably preferred if they had gone with a screw down. And then finally, the bezel insert. As I mentioned, it's an aluminum bezel insert. I probably would have preferred if they had gone with a matte ceramic bezel insert, or possibly even a polished ceramic bezel insert. But ceramic, it's just nice to have the scratch resistance. However, I've got to say, I do think the satiny anodized finish that you get with this does suit the design really well. So that's one that I'm kind of indifferent to as a whole, but I do like the scratch resistance that comes with ceramic. So where does that leave us? At first glance, when you look at this, it just might seem like another mecha quartz-based chronograph in a sea of other options out there. It seems kind of vanilla. However, as you start to unpack the details, and particularly once you get this in the metal and wear it on wrist, it's one that I think, like me, you'd probably really come to appreciate. It's just very well done. It's an easy watch that you don't have to think about. It's a grab and go, and I think it looks really nice and feels great as well. So with that, in the end, I'm pretty delighted with this, and I'm very glad to have one in the collection, so I appreciate them sending this in. So there you have it. I hope you did enjoy this video. Do drop a comment. Let me know what you think. With 8 different options that you have available, which one's your favorite? Do you like this one? Do you like another one? Finally, if you haven't done so already, tap that like button, and if you're not already, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.